get
For sure.
emotionally attached to them after many years. Thomas Kuhn, of course, Structure of Scientific Revolutions, he says old theories change when the oldest person who supports it dies. So he literally, when the old faculty dies, then the new people can come in and say, "Oh my gosh, thank good old George is dead.
Oh, jeez.
Now we can scrap that. We don't have to teach this class anymore." Um,
Well, that I would say that certainly a part of the process of science is not being attached, and to be open to, uh, you know, going through the process of taking a theory, have an experimentalist come up with an experiment, have somebody, a skilled technician who can carry out that experiment, and
right?
then have the people that can, understand the other process or the other results through mathematics or whatever, and start comparing,
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
competing
And but we
data.
don't teach that. That's the thing, Scott, is we don't teach that.
That's
We
that's the
don't teach
process
we
of
teach
science. It's
science
not
as
about
here's an experiment, you should get this answer, then you're right. But we don't teach science as a process, and we don't teach students how we decide when we accept or reject these ideas.
Mhm.
And I think it's high time we did.
Well,
And it's
it
not
seems to
hard
be
to
a
do. And the
balance.
nice thing about heliocentric versus geocentric, for almost everybody, this is not controversial. It's not that I haven't had my iconic, you know, model people come out at me. And You do get flat Earth people. You don't generally find fixed Earth people.
Fixed Earth
Even the
people.
flat Earth people tend to think that the Earth orbits the sun. You don't really get fixed Earth people
Well,
anymore.
when I was 4 years old, I would have been a fixed Earth person, because I thought that the stars and the whole thing above us, that dome above that blue dome that would sometimes get clouds in it,
The Dome of Night,
was a bubble around us.
right? What do they call it? The Bowl of Night.
Yeah. So,
There was a product called the Bowl of Night, and basically it was a star map printed on a black or a dark blue vinyl ball, but it had a ring inside it and it was collapsed. So it was just a dome, and by squishing it and shifting it, you could change what stars you saw and where the altitude to the pole was. And
hmm
so you could squish this thing around. It was really quite a clever product. Maurice had them. God knows where he got them. He had so many odd things.
mm, yes.
So many odd things.
Well, let's look at our audience today. We have Harold Locke. He was the first one to sign on. He says, Happy Monday, everybody. Pekka says, Good afternoon from Stockholm.
Oh,
Whole
wonderful.
weekend without this stream is so hard to manage with cloudy skies on top. Sorry, Pekka. Martin Eastburn says, Here we are. Mike Wiesner says, Hello. Martin says, As a physicist, I meet many people who think a theory, thought to me, as a law, agree, ag- aggregated as fact or agreed as fact.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So people have the misconception that theories are facts,
Yes.
right? um, Waji's on with us today. Hello, everybody. Pekka says, when I was a kind, when I was a, when I, he says, I told my friend when the autumn came that the stars will come back too. Okay.
Is this someone in Stockholm?
Yes, Pekka's in
Oh, so
Stockholm.
they have the almost endless daylight
Right.
up that far north. Yeah. When
Well, they must
that
have
makes sense now. When
nighttime
autumn
too.
returns, the stars will too. Yeah.
Yeah.
The sky would only be dark for a few hours a day.
Hmm. Volume a little low for me. Okay, let's see what we can do, guys. How about that? Or this? No, that's too much. Well, hello everybody. This is Scott Roberts and Daniel Barth. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm right. You can see the microphone's like right there. So, and I have things turned up, and so hopefully we're getting some better volume at this point. I did have the microphone pushed back a little bit, so maybe that's what it was. Not sure. I have a new cable on. Trust me, guys. I'm doing everything I think is right, but and I don't know what the theory is behind this. Okay, so. Anyhow, but Daniel and I were talking about theories and the process of science, and and that's kind of the topic of today's program. But this has to do with heliocentrism and how do you know that theory is correct. So I'm going to turn it over to the doctor.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to How Do You Know? And I want to really reach out to our astronomy outreach people today, teachers too. But one of the interesting things, anytime you're involved in science in the public eye, you get the how do you know for sure questions. The interesting thing is that as outreach people, as teachers, as astronomers, one thing we don't often teach, and I think we should, is how we decide when a theory is no good. You hear all sorts of crazy stuff today. You hear people say, well, don't you believe in? And, the earth is flat, the earth is round, the climate is warming, the climate is not warming, the poles are melting. Don't you believe? And I try to be very firm, but, I don't come down really hard on people, but science isn't about belief. I have my beliefs, so do most people, but that's not where science is. Science is about data, nor is science about polls. 10,000 dentists recommend fluoride toothpaste. Well, I don't care how many people faithfully recommend particular toothpaste.
Galileo,
I want to see the data.
Yeah.
I want to see the experiment that says we had 1,000 people brush with fluoride and 1,000 without, and here's how many cavities they want. I want to see the data. And the other thing that we see so often is people ask for guarantees. Is the vaccine 100% effective? Is this treatment 100%? Can you guarantee I'll be cured? If I use your wart cream, will my wart go away 100%? Can you guarantee? And real science offers no guarantees. And Scott, you know this, and so do I.
Yeah.
We say, we have to have a confidence about to 5 nines, what we call 5 sigma, before we publish. We have to be really sure. But does that mean we know we're right? No, it doesn't. And so there are people who are very bothered by the inherent uncertainty of science. Science is a process. Science is always changing. I think it was Galileo who said to the Pope, do not make science an article of faith. Faith is supposed to be eternal, and science is always changing. There's always somebody coming down the road who says, ooh, I have a better idea. And this uncertainty, I know my students and people I talk to, well, don't you know for sure? Well, how do you decide? And that's something we're going to take a look at today, and hopefully in a non-threatening and friendly way, because I have yet to meet a person who genuinely says the Earth is fixed in the center of the solar system and the stars and everything orbit around us. That was, we forget, that was the common view, the literate view, the educated view, the view that was taught in universities for something silly like 20 centuries from well before Aristotle. And Aristotle dates to several hundred years BC. So we're talking something that was around for a couple of thousand years when Copernicus and Galileo said, no, no, thumbs down, the Earth is not the center. So if you're the only one who disagrees with the going theory, you're either a really brilliant person or you're a nut job. And most times people, if you come up and say, oh, Einstein was wrong, I have a different theory of how gravity works, most people will put you in the crackpot crowd rather than in the, oh, I'm sure you're the next genius. Because the odds of meeting someone who knows very little are much greater than meeting, actually the next Einstein or the next Hawking or
Yeah.
Wheeler or whoever.
Wasn't Einstein considered a crackpot at one point?
Oh, he was.
Like,
And it was
his
Eddington.
teachers didn't want to, they were going to fail him and all
Oh
kinds
yes, it was Eddington who took him seriously and went and looked at I believe it was the Hyades or the Pleiades, and said, "Oh look, the stars aren't where they're supposed to be during this eclipse,"
Yes.
and really made Einstein's reputation. But we're going to look at something much less controversial today than relativity. We're going to take a look at how do we know that the sun is in the center. And I'm going to start out, I'm going to just say briefly, we're going to be showing some nice models today. We'll be showing some models. Here's one of Mars, and here's one of the Earth. And some folks are going to go, ooh, where do I get them? They are not in these are one of the few products that are not in the Explore store.
No.
You got to make your own, folks. They're really simple. Just a ping pong ball and some masking tape and some construction adhesive, some black spray paint, and basically you're ready to go. You can take a look at last week's How Do You Know show, How Do You Know #2, on how do lunar phases work. And that has a complete workup of how do you make those models. You can also get the activity sheet on the explorescientific.com/howdoyouknow on the How Do You Know Facebook page. Astronomy for Educators. There's a lot of places to get that material. And so we're not going to belabor how you make the models. Today's model is really simple. We have an Earth, and this lovely one was made by a student, and it features this is Australia, and you can see the peninsula with Java and Indonesia and going up into China and the Japans is really lovely. And for my friends down under. And we have a model of Venus, which looks like a ping pong ball that's half black and half white. Venus, of course, Scott, is covered by clouds 24/7. I guess it's 225 there because it has a shorter year than we do, but it's constantly covered by clouds. And if you look at Venus, you can never see a surface feature. I had someone say, well, goodness, if you have models with planets painted half black and half white, won't this lead to misconceptions by students? And I said, no, actually not. Because we need to think about, and here's the third piece for a model today, it's a sun, a ping pong ball painted yellow. And if we think about the sun being a single distant candle, and you can do this yourself. Take a candle works much better than a flashlight. Take a candle and a tennis ball and go lock yourself in a dark closet or in a basement somewhere that's dark. Light your candle, and I defy you, hold the ping pong or the tennis ball where you wish. You will not be able to illuminate more than half of it with a single candle. The light falls, it lights up half the sphere, and that's it. The light doesn't reach around the back. So, in fact, this is not a misconception. It's a really pretty accurate conception of our model. And when Galileo took a look at, built his telescope, first thing he looked at, I'm sure, was the moon. Famously, Jupiter was one of the second targets that he took a look at. And I think he invented the telescope in 1609. I believe it was in late 1609, early 1610. He finally got a look at Venus. To his astonishment, Venus showed phases. And the phases stunned him. Why should a planet have phases? Venus had phases, Mercury has phases, but in fact, all the other planets, and we're just dealing with 5 tonight. We're dealing with Galileo's classical planets. Mercury and Venus, the inferior planets, closer to the sun than we are. And then Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, the superior planets, farther away from the sun than we are. And Galileo noticed our inferior planets have phases, superior planets do not. And so why? And you know, Scott, of course, many of our listeners know that Galileo's great quest was to find a way to prove Copernicus was correct.
Yeah.
Copernicus in the mid 1400s basically starts working on this lovely sun-centered solar system, and it explains so many things. Why do we have day and night? Why do we have seasons? Why are the seasons reversed in the southern hemisphere? All these lovely, lovely things. The stars are very far away. And Copernicus said this is, and his model wasn't entirely correct either. His model was a work in progress. Like Ptolemy, like Aristotle, he had lots of circles, but not nearly as many. Galileo was convinced Copernicus was right in that the sun was in the center, the earth was not fixed. The earth both spun and it revolved around the sun, rotated on its axis. And Galileo was certain that this simplified model with each planet in its independent orbit was correct, but at the time, there was no data, no experiment could distinguish between the sun-centered and earth-centered model. And that's an interesting thing that happens today. How do we have an experiment that will tell if this theory or that theory is correct? And the one that many of our viewers, I'm sure, if you've watched any of the hurricane predictions, when the hurricanes come up the Gulf Coast and along the Atlantic coast, and if you look up hurricane prediction models, you'll find that when one of these hurricanes coming up, I remember, I guess it was Irma, that came up the Florida coast. I had family living in South Florida, so we were watching very carefully. And the models predicted all sorts of paths. It's going to go up the East Coast, up the West Coast. It's going to cross the peninsula. It's going to go out and hit Texas. It's going to, and the fact of the matter is, there was no good experiment except watch the hurricane. And surprise, the same model doesn't do a good job predicting each hurricane, or else we would throw out the other models. So we have yet to have a deciding experiment. Galileo was able to do that deciding experiment. He invented a telescope. The telescope showed him moons around Jupiter. The old Aristotelian Ptolemaic theory said everything orbits the Earth. Wow, these are clearly moons around Jupiter. We can see them orbiting. We can time their orbits. We see they're in different time periods. Slower, takes them longer the more they're farther away. Well, that's great. But people said, well, okay, planets can have moons like the Earth does. That still doesn't prove that Jupiter doesn't orbit the Earth. Once Galileo saw phases, then we had the aha moment. Because in fact, both models, it's a misconception that the old Earth-centered model doesn't predict phases for Venus. In fact, it does. Both models predict phases, but they predict phases in very different ways. And we're going to take a look at this, and I hope it will be a little bit enlightening. So once again, I'm going to switch over to my alternate camera here. And I think I can click on my video. Here's my other camera. Sadly, it's not quite as nice a camera as the one. And so here we go. Earth is fixed in the center, the fixed Earth. And you know what the Inquisition made Galileo say when he repented, don't you, Scott?
Well, they made him throw out all of his
Yes.
observations, and they made him say that the Earth was the center of the universe.
The Earth was the center of the universe, that it neither revolved nor rotated, that it was fixed. And as the apocryphal story, who knows if this is true, But the apocryphal story is that when he rose from his knees, this almost 70-year-old man, he rose from his knees after recanting the entire Copernican, and under his breath, he says, "Eppur si muove," and yet it moves, which I just get shivers when I hear that. I just think it's wonderful. The last act of defiance, of course, he spent the rest of his life in prison, but details. We all must sacrifice for science. So here we go. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. And what we've got now is we have the sun. I'm going to go ahead and put over here, and I'm going to go ahead, and Venus is closer. I'm hoping we can see this. There we are. Now, what happens, the problem is the sun goes around us every day. And if we take a look at this model and we say, how does this look? Well, one of the first interesting things we see is that with the sun over here, daylight side, nighttime side, right? And here's Venus. Oh, look, we're seeing Venus in 100% full phase. We're seeing Venus fully illuminated. And in fact, there's no such thing. We cannot see Venus fully illuminated. And if it was over here, we should be able, the new phase. And of course, this, if Venus was perfectly lined up this way, we wouldn't be able to see the new phase either. We'd be staring at the sun. That's really bad. Don't do that, kids. So let's take a look at what happens over here. Remember, the sun goes around once a day. Venus, they knew the orbit of Venus was about 225 days, but the sun, they said, goes around every single day. So what happens as we move our sun? As we move our sun, we have to align Earth and Venus to match. And so, oh, we're starting to see a phase here. We move the sun a little more. We move the Earth, we move Venus. Now, we're not changing Venus very much because remember, Scott, this is supposed to be one day. As we continue to move the sun around, here we go. And here we're seeing, oh, we're starting to see Venus. And as it comes around, as it moves closer, it doesn't change that much. But you notice something, Scott? We can never see Venus. We can never see Venus in what we call quarter phase. We can never see Venus. And as the sun goes around, Venus is going to follow this way. And so what we're going to see is this oscillating motion, right? So in the course of a single day, or if you prefer, in the course of a single night, as the sun goes around from here to here, so in the course of a single evening, we should see the phase of Venus change from gibbous on one side to gibbous on the other.
But that doesn't happen that way.
That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. You've observed Venus through a telescope, so have I.
Yeah.
The phases of Venus take weeks to change. It's not a fast thing because, of course, unlike the moon, which orbits in 28 days, Venus orbits the sun in 225 days. So it takes weeks and weeks and weeks to see the changes in the phases of Venus. But if this central Earth was correct, then we would see this lovely oscillating.
Yeah, it'd be cool, but
it would be cool, but it doesn't happen.
But it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Not only that, there's no way you can arrange the sun here to see a lovely crescent phase.
Never.
You can't arrange because the sun would have to go from inside Venus's orbit to outside it. And of course, at that point where it shared the same orbit, then we would see the quarter phase. Of course, Venus would be on a collision course for fiery death. But when we look at this and we say, oh, what's the problem with the fixed Earth model? Well, first of all, it predicts something that's not true. Venus should change phases in just hours, and it should oscillate from showing the phase on the left to the phase on the right, or east and west if you prefer. The other thing is it cannot show, it is impossible for this model to show the crescent phase or the quarter phase. That is, it cannot show Venus as a nice little crescent here and it cannot show Venus as half illuminated. So our Aristotelian model has some problems. First of all, it predicts things that do not happen. Now, there are theories that have been revised which have failed to predict certain things. The standard particle model of physics is famous for this. We had the electrons, okay, and then someone says, well, the proton's in the middle. Then Chadwick comes along and says, well, there should be a neutron too. That theory said nothing about the neutron, but in fact, we were able to say, okay, we can revise our model to show how the neutron works. You can't revise this model to show how crescent or quarter phases work. It can't be done. The second thing is that this model, it's impossible for this model to show Venus changing slowly over the course of weeks from a crescent to a nearly full. We lose it for a while, and then it goes from daytime star to nighttime star, and we go back from gibbous through crescent. We never see full, we never see new, but we do see all the other phases. Mm-hmm. So Aristotle's old model fails on two important points. The first, which is damaging but not crippling, it's unable to predict some things that we actually see. But the really damning part is that it predicts things which are not possible. Here's one of them. Venus in full phase, seen at midnight. You realize this is the daytime side, so the start point facing directly toward us is noon. The point facing directly opposite us is midnight. This says Venus should be able to be visible at in principle at any time of night. We see Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and all the outer planets. We can see them potentially at any time in the evening. We may have to wait for them to be there, but in fact, they cross the entire sky. They appear at the meridian, and this says Venus should too, and it does not. So Aristotle is failing on a couple of big points here. And so at this point, we say, okay, the old theory is obviously broken. So do we keep it and kind of tweak it, or do we throw it away? And we know what Ptolemy's answer was with Aristotle's theory. We ever more accurate planetary observations in Persia, in Greece, in Egypt, the star catalog of Ulugh Beg, the great astronomer from Baghdad, then Persia, and these more accurate chartings of the movements of the planets and the retrograde motion. Oh, how do we do the retrograde motion? Well, Ptolemy said, oh, we can have these lovely, lovely epicycles. And so he took Aristotle's model and he modified it. He said, I can change it so that it will account for these new things we've seen.
Okay.
But up until that point, Aristotle had never predicted anything that was actually impossible. It had never predicted something that we can never see in the sky. With the discovery, the invention of the telescope and the discovery of the phases of Venus, we see this in the sky with a telescope. And in fact, there's no way for this Earth-centered model to predict it. So the theory's got to go in the ash can, the ash pile of history. Who said that? I forget. But in any case, when we get that, the question is, okay, is the new theory any better? Because if you have an old theory and you find, oh, gosh, this doesn't work, well, what about the new theory and will it work better? So we're going to take this away and I'm going to change my background. Huzzah, here we go. I used this and I made a lovely GIF. I put it on the Explore page and on the Astronomy for Educators. Did you get a chance to see that one with the GIF with the phases of Venus?
No, not yet.
No, not yet? Okay.
Not yet.
That's okay. Let's go ahead and do what Copernicus says, and let's put the sun in the center. There it is. Very nice. And we'll go ahead and we'll have Venus as an inner planet inferior to Earth. And here's Earth, and it is superior. Now, a couple things I'm going to point out here. when we're looking at this model, we realize that the Earth is spinning anti-clockwise. So if we have our little observer fellow here, we realize that our observer guy is going around and he's actually looking over his shoulder here at sunrise or sunset to see Venus. The other thing we're going to realize here, someone asked me, well, why don't you have the Earth spinning in this model? Okay, if we're talking about progressing Venus around from here to here, that takes about 110 days, right? So something on the order of 4 months. So we only see Venus at sunrise or sunset. And in effect, all we have to do is move Venus. We could make this model dynamic and have the Earth move too, but that means we would simply change the timing, but not the fundamentals of our model. So let's take a look at what we have here. This is new Venus, which of course we cannot see. The angle of the camera shows a little crescent up top here, but I'm asking everybody to kind of ignore that because in fact, we wouldn't be seeing that. I'm going to try to line these up in the camera. There we go. So we wouldn't see this. This would be daytime, even dawn or dusk. We wouldn't see it because we're staring right towards the sun. And that's a really bad idea. Don't do that. As we move around a bit. Now, again, we move around just a little bit and we see now we have this lovely crescent of Venus. And do you notice, Scott, how close Venus is to Earth?
Yes.
Venus has a distance from the sun of about 0.72 AU. Earth, of course, is 1. So this distance is about a quarter of an AU. So it's the Earth is roughly 100 million miles from the sun. So this is only, finger quotes there, only 25 million miles. But it's very close to us. And so when we see this lovely crescent form, Venus is really close. This crescent form, although only a small amount of Venus is illuminated, that's the brightest Venus gets. Not because so much is illuminated, but because it's so close. As we move around and we're keeping the daylight side of Venus pointing the sun, we do in fact get to this position where we've got Venus and the sun and Earth make this lovely 90-degree angle. And when it makes that 90-degree angle, here we see the quarter phase, of course, which Aristotle's model says is not possible because the sun would have to be closer to us sometimes and farther away. Obviously, that doesn't work here. It comes out very naturally. We continue to progress around the model. And now Venus is more fully illuminated. And as we get around to here, we've only got a tiny little slice of darkness over here. The terminator is almost all the way across. Mm-hmm. But look what's happened to the distance. 3/4 and 3/4 is 1.5. Another quarter is 2. So we've gone from roughly a distance of 0.25 AU to 2.5 AU. Venus is, in fact, now 5 times farther away. And so its apparent diameter shrinks. And here we have the transition from, here we're rotating around to the east. Here we have a transition from dawn star to evening star, which occurs in just a few days, doesn't take very long. And as we come closer again, once again, we're hitting that phase and we're seeing not only the phases change in the amount of time predicted by the orbit, but we're seeing the increase in brightness and the increase in the apparent size. Venus grows about 5 or 6 times bigger. I think it's about 6 is the actual number. Gets to be about 6 times larger in our telescope or binocular than it was when it was near to full phase. So here we see
lots of nice predictions are working out.
Lots of nice predictions are working out. Not only that, but this model doesn't require anything like Ptolemy's Epicycles. You remember, you've seen the diagram, Scott,
Very
and
complex.
anyone can go, and it's Ptolemy with a P, Ptolemy for our friends out there. And if you go and you look up Ptolemy's model of the solar system, if you look up the Ptolemaic model, and you'll see it has this lovely spirograph sort of a thing. Ptolemy's model, and I think I can sketch it for you here real quickly. Ptolemy's model says, oh, here is the Earth in the center, and here is the orbit of a planet. Let's say it's Mars, and Ptolemy says this isn't all that happens. What happens is there's another disk, and Mars actually sits here. And so this disk rotates around like a ball rolling around a large hoop. And so this Mars now takes this lovely path and goes this way. And so we see, we've got it now. We can get it backing up, going backward in the sky. And so we get this as what is called retrograde motion. Let's see if I can. I'm getting better at this writing sideways stuff.
You are.
We get this retrograde motion, which is right here, friends. Here's this retrograde motion, and it happens every year to every planet. And this really bothered Aristotle and his friends because, of course, the simple model of the Earth in the center couldn't predict it. And so Ptolemy said, let's add this gadget. Of course, the problem is every planet has to have a different size epicycle, and they have to turn at different speeds. And it turns out that this isn't directly on center either. And they had all of these changes that they made. And in fact, it worked quite well. It worked from about 200 AD to about 1500 AD. That's a 1300-year run. That's amazing. That's amazing run for a scientific theory. Mm-hmm. But it adds all these strange things. On the other hand, when we take a look at the model of Copernicus and Galileo, right? Here's the Earth. Here's the sun. Here's Venus. Notice how simple. Notice how elegant. There's nothing extra needed apart from these lovely concentric orbits. Nothing else is needed. You don't have to add gadgets. You don't have to add strange calculations. You don't have to adjust for every single planet. Because for Mercury and Venus, which are both inferior, closer to the sun, the phases work out quite naturally. The other brilliant part, Galileo noticed that in fact, and we're going to move Earth much closer in, and you can do this. It works nicely on a floor. If you put the Earth 1 foot away, and then if you've got Jupiter, and here's a Jupiter model one of my students made. It has a little red spot on it. If you put Jupiter 5 times farther away, as Jupiter orbits much farther away from the position of Earth is so close to the sun, relatively speaking, that we effectively always see Jupiter as an entire disk. So no matter where Jupiter is, we're looking outward from near the sun to Jupiter. And so we don't see phases at all. Jupiter's away over here, and we go, I'm moving it in so we can see it in the camera. So we're moving it in like this, and we're saying, gee, because Jupiter is so far away, we virtually never see a phase. Now, our very clever astronomers out there, Scott, are going to say, Jupiter does have very minor phases. It goes from 100% lit to 93% lit or something like that. And yes, if you're a very, very accurate astronomer, you can see the fact that Jupiter has very tiny phases. Will again, in fact, confirm the predictions of Galileo and Copernicus. More like Newton and Kepler, I think, but but in fact, Galileo's observation that superior planets never have phases. Inferior planets always do. This comes out quite naturally as long as you have the sun in the center and all the planets effectively in concentric orbits. You don't have to add anything. It comes out naturally as a result of the organization. And at this point, if you've taken someone through and said, oh, look how the screwy things that Aristotle says should happen to the phases of Venus, and look how nice and naturally they come out with the sun-centered system. This is why we threw out Aristotle. He shows things that cannot happen. Things that do happen, he says, are impossible. And actually, it's the latter that is the real crippling blow. And you may know, and again, this may in fact be an apocryphal story, but I've seen this in several sources. The cardinal from the Inquisition, I believe his name was Bernardo Gui, and Galileo took a bunch of cardinals up to the top of a building with his telescope and said, look, phases of Venus. You see, the sun must be in the center. And the great man looked in the telescope and said, I don't believe it.
Yeah, well, there's the there's the rub.
There's the rub. And he actually said, he took this position that my faith tells me how the solar system is arranged, and you have data that disagrees. I feel I am being deceived. I smell flat earthness here somewhere. It's much the same. No, this data that contradicts my idea must be deception, hogwash, balderdash, one of my favorite words. I can still use that one in class.
I really wonder if they thought it was some sort of sorcery or a trick of the lenses, or
they never, I don't know that they ever accused Galileo of sorcery. They did accuse him of heresy, because by that time, of course, the Aristotelian theory had been made a doctrine of Orthodox Catholicism. So to be a good Christian, you must believe these things. And Galileo said, Pope Urban VIII was actually a boyhood friend. He said, do not do this. Do not make articles of science which are going to change part of your faith. It's not a good idea. Faith, the science always changes. And you start to look really sketchy if you're saying, oh, remember what we said last week was an eternal truth? Sorry.
It's not true anymore.
It's not true anymore.
That scientific fact is not.
Galileo pointed out quite rightly that it makes all of this it makes everything in question. Science, of course, is supposed to be questioned, but we see these things, these two things. Oh, are you predicting things which are impossible? And do you say that things which actually happen cannot happen in your theory? Those two, that's the 1-2 punch. That's how we know we need to throw a theory out. And I think kind of students get the idea today that, oh, the theory gets thrown out when enough scientists believe in this one or that one. A theory gets thrown out when it's not popular or it's no longer politically relevant. And, oh, my data is as good as your data. In fact, it's not. We need to teach students we need to teach everyone, be humble before the facts, right? Follow where they lead you. I guess it was Sherlock Holmes who said this is a capital error to theorize in advance of your data. He was quite right, and following in the footsteps of Aristotle and Copernicus and many other people. Kepler, who famously fought against the idea of non-circular orbits for 18 years before finally bowing down. And of course, he was a student of Tycho. So there you go. I'm hoping this is fun. Did we get any interesting questions in today?
Yes, there's lots of comments here.
Oh, good.
Just people commenting on different aspects of the conversation. Let's see. Book Davies says the wee solar system is like a wee gathering of particles. Yes. And book says, "Who dares call the Inquisition?" Right. Well, book also says rationality alone can get you a long way, but not as far as when it's with objectivity and empiricism.
Quite right.
Yes. Martin
Yes, you can
Eastman.
have many rational theories which are in fact not true.
This-
Science is littered with them.
Martin Eastman says many scientists lost their life looking at and trying to prove something in electricity and in planetary observations.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Galileo pretty much
And
blinded
magnetism.
himself in one eye looking at sunspots.
Didn't he switch to the other eye so he could see more?
I think he did sunspots much later. And I'm not sure who it
Poor
was
guy.
who said, we can project them on a piece of paper.
Yeah. And Harold does confirm that you are 10% louder than me. So there you go.
That may be just my inherent teacher.
Hello. How's that?
Oh, that's much louder.
Much louder. Okay.
Like Venus, you're now closer to us. This is an
Anyhow,
analog.
it was fun, and I did find your GIF here. I will share that.
Okay.
Yeah, and so here it is. Let's see.
Yeah, this is a great model, and I think I can show you here. Where's one of mine with magnets? Here's one. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
There it is, and you can see it getting closer. And friends, all I did with that was set up the model and hold my cell phone camera as still as I could and just click the pictures. And there are lots of free GIF makers that are around. Some of you who are teaching out there, the little model here, you see the one that was wobbling. It's because it has a little magnet glued to the bottom. It's made on a poker chip instead of a drinks cap. And so this sticks very nicely onto a whiteboard. And this works wonderfully for GIFs. If you're doing outreach and you're saying, okay, folks, let's set this up, try this, take your camera and take a few pictures and then just scroll through. It makes a lovely, convincing demonstration. And it shows people that really it's important where we view the solar system is critical. Because we view everything from this lovely rotating big blue marble. Isn't that what Sagan said? Yeah. So we view the solar system from the surface of the Earth looking out. And we are on a platform that not only rotates, but revolves. And so interpreting what we see is quite a puzzle. And we have an obligation to help younger people and just other adults understand how we know what we know. And lots of people, and it's the age of the internet, anyone can have a platform to claim anything. And literally,
They do.
They do. I tell my students, it's tough to think of something too far out that it's not on the internet somewhere and doesn't have its own website. But the idea that you can show someone that it's not because I say so, it's because the data supports this idea. And it takes it away from this cult of personality. And there you go.
And there you go.
So
Now, somebody
go
else
ahead.
is asking, is this available from Explore Scientific? And the answer is no. Okay. But where did you get yours? You have one behind you.
Sky and Telescope.
Sky and Telescope. That would
Sky and
be-
Telescope, and they have Mars, and they have Venus, and they have, I think they have 6 or 7 different ones.
Yeah.
And that's the nice 12-inch model. And I believe it's made by Rapogli. Not sure how you say it.
I think it says somewhere on here.
Yeah.
Not sure. Mine doesn't. I think yours does.
Mine says,
Oh, wait a minute. No. Replogel. That's how
yeah, Rapogli or Rapogl. Folks, if anybody from Rapogl is listening and it's Rapogli, I'm sorry.
180 miles to the inch. Okay.
Yeah.
This one was sold by Buzz Aldrin, so I'm not selling this one. Okay.
No, never. But I got mine from skyandtelescope.com. I think that's their website, and you can find them there. The other thing, friends, is, go ahead and make your own set of models. It's really satisfying. And you can get some lovely art there. And it's very interesting. People, when they see these on my desk, they can't resist playing with them. I keep a set of these models. Here's the Earth and the Moon and the Sun, and I keep a set of these on my desk at the university. And people come to visit, and they stop into my office. Ooh, what's that? Where did you get them? And they pick them up. They're kind of like a finger magnet. People pick them up. Every once in a while, I lose one. It gets sticky fingered away from my office. I have to make one again. But people love them. Mm-hmm. Children love them. And they're so inexpensive and fun and easy to make that you literally, if you had an outreach event, you could have people making their own. Mm-hmm. And if you've got, I don't know what I use here, liquid nails, cement, and it sets up in literally 5 minutes, and you can have people make them and take them home at the end of the evening, and they've got some models that they've made themselves. Really fun outreach event. Yeah. And next week, Scott, we're going to go and we're going to deal with another outreach thing.
Okay.
The outreach thing we're going to deal with next time has to do with probably the most common thing that happens when people set up a telescope and somebody comes up and says, ooh, what are you looking at? Can I see the moon? And of course, sure you do. And you put up the moon and it's this lovely view. And you know, and I know the first view of the moon through a really nice telescope is even a fairly mediocre telescope is really quite stunning. It's absolutely stunning. The problem is in our 21st century world, we get bombarded with thousands and thousands of images every day. There are studies that say that young people under 20 who are very, they have their tablet, they have their phone, they have their TV, they see maybe 5,000 to 10,000 images a day. And so someone looks in the eyepiece and they go, oh yeah, it's the moon, I've seen it.
Yeah, they haven't seen it.
They haven't seen it. And in fact, they look at it and they're experiencing something terrific and something wonderful, and yet they have no idea what they're actually looking at. And what I found over the years teaching astronomy, and this is my 41st year teaching astronomy, kind of nuts, but there it goes. Astronomy keeps you young. I had someone ask me, well, you're an astronomer, aren't you outdoors a lot? And I said, yes. And they said, and you're bald. And I said, yes. How do you keep from getting sunburned? What do you use? And I had to laugh. Anyway, true story, actually. So the idea is, no, you're laughing now. It happened. I can't make this stuff up. So the question is, how do you bring enough knowledge to the eyepiece so that when somebody looks, that they actually observe, they stop seeing and they observe and they go, ooh, I know, that's a Mario, that's a crater, look, a mountain. Oh my gosh, those are rays. How do you do that? Well, one of the really cool ways is to have someone make their own model of the lunar surface. And we're going to do this next week on How Do You Know? It's a really exciting activity. For those of you interested in really low-cost science, yes, you can do this with Salto, but I use I think the plasticine clay, the basic school art clay, the oil-based clay. So if you've got some clay at home, friends, for next week, if you've got about a pound of white or gray clay or light-colored clay, and then you've got, all it takes is an ounce or two of darker colored clay. And no, you don't have to have white and gray. I've seen lovely models in fluorescent green and blue. Any two contrasting colors works. But we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to see how we can make our own model. And then we're going to go a little bit beyond. How can you take this and can you take this model and experience the amount of energy it takes from one crater to the other? Can you see mapping? Can you do distances? Can you see how lunar phases create shadows that change along the terminator? You can do all this and more with this exciting model, and we'll see that next time on How Do You Know?
Great. Awesome. All right. Yay.
Thanks, everybody. Astronomy for Educators at gmail.com if you have questions or if you would like curriculum help or advice. And of course, the Explore Scientific page on Facebook for How Do You Know, and the Astronomy for Educators page on How Do You Know. And if you're interested, the Astronomy for Educators text is available free. Just go to your favorite search engine and put in astronomy for educators, comma, Daniel Barth. It'll come right up as the #1 result, guarantee it. Over 4,100 schools around the world, Scott. We got a new
Wow,
user from
congratulations.
Bulgaria. And thank God for online translating algorithms, because it came in and I'm not sure what they speak in Bulgarian, but
I
it was
assume.
very interesting alphabet, but I was able to translate it. They said, "Oh, hi, can we have some fun stuff?" So take a look, download those materials from
Yep,
Scott's website or email me, and we'll get you hooked up. And we'll see you next week on How to
next
Get
time. Yep, thanks very much. Thank you, Daniel. And coming up tomorrow, we have a special program called Explore Now, where we interview individuals. This time, we're going to interview two individuals, Ian McClellan and Bill Peters, and they both are part of Ian McClellan Consulting. And what those guys do is they help build planetariums and science centers, and they consult for some of the greatest historical observatories in the world. And they're both going to be live with me tomorrow at 4 o'clock Central. And then at 8 o'clock Central, Molly Wakeling, who's been on lots of our Global Star Parties, is herself being our guest host on the 39th Global Star Party. So she has a terrific lineup of speakers and astrophotographers, and of course you're invited to be part of it as well. I assume with so many that she has lined up, it's going to be a late night, but it should be fascinating. And she's got lots of new people, fresh faces, and stuff like that I think you'll really enjoy. So take care, and as our friend Jack Horkheimer always said, keep looking up.
Absolutely. Bye-bye, everybody.
Hello, everybody. This is Scott Roberts from Explore Scientific, and today I want to talk about the world-famous Galileo telescope kit. This is a kit that you assemble by yourself. You'll learn how optics work by assembling the objective lens and also the eyepiece. And there's two different eyepieces that are in this. The 25 power, 20 millimeter eyepiece, but it also comes with this very clever little device here that works both as a Barlow lens that will double the magnification of this eyepiece, making it 50 power, or it can be used also as a Galilean eyepiece, which gives 17 power to the telescope. This is what Galileo virtually saw through his own telescope. So you can have that same experience that Galileo had looking at the moon, looking at Saturn's rings, looking at Jupiter. It is a telescope that was designed for the International Year of Astronomy in 2009, and it's a fantastic kit, both for child and adult, to learn how a telescope works. And so if you get the telescope like this, you can either have it on a stand like this, you can hand hold it like a pirate's glass, or on the bottom here we have a threaded hole here that you can put it on a camera tripod. Very versatile, very rugged, and a lot of fun, all from Explore Scientific.